This lesson's on genomes and chromosomes. First, let's define genome. Genome means all the genetic material in an organism. So it includes the DNA in the nucleus, the nuclear DNA, the mitochondrial DNA, the DNA in the mitochondria, and if we're talking about a plant, it refers to the chloroplast DNA as well. And we could be more specific if we wanted to. If we only wanted to talk about the nuclear DNA, we could talk about the nuclear genome, the mitochondrial genome, etc. And it includes both the coding DNA and the non-coding DNA. So just because it's called genome, that doesn't mean it's just the genes, it's including the non-coding DNA as well. Now let's remember that eukaryote chromosomes are linear. So if we're looking at a one-chromatid chromosome that hasn't replicated, this whole thing is one long DNA double helix, and it's associated with lots of protein. We've talked about the histone proteins in the center of the nucleosomes in previous lessons. So eukaryotic chromosomes are linear, and they're associated with lots of protein. In contrast, bacterial chromosomes are circular. So this is a bit of a bunched up circle, and they're associated with less protein. It's not the case that they have no protein, but it's not as complex, it seems, as in eukaryotic chromosomes. Now, if this is a bacterium, and in it we have the circular chromosome, there are also other bits of DNA that I'm drawing here in red in little circular arrangements called plasmids. And plasmids contain genes that are not essential for the functioning of the bacterium, but can be useful. And they often include genes for antibiotic resistance, for example. And plasmids can be passed from one bacterium to another. So if this is another bacterium over here, and it doesn't have the plasmid, one of the plasmids that this one has, it can receive it, and that means that now this one has, for example, the antibiotic resistance that's coded for by this plasmid. The bacteria keep the essential DNA for running their cells on this circular chromosome, and then they have these plasmids that they can pass between them. Last, let's talk about mitochondrial and chloroplast DNA. So here is a mitochondrion, and it has its own DNA, and like bacteria, that's also on a circular chromosome. So here's a mitochondrial circular chromosome. So mitochondria have circular chromosomes, and remember that the endosymbiotic theory tells us that mitochondria and chloroplasts originated from free-living prokaryotes that were engulfed by the precursors to eukaryotes. And so this circular chromosome, which is similar to the circular chromosome in bacteria, is again evidence for the endosymbiotic theory. Now, interestingly, mitochondria are maternally inherited. You get your mitochondria from the mitochondria that were in the egg cell of your mother, and therefore the mitochondrial DNA is inherited through the maternal line. So mitochondrial DNA can be used to trace the maternal line, just like DNA on the Y chromosome only comes from your father. If you're a male, you have a Y chromosome that comes from your father, and so that can be used to trace the paternal line. So mitochondrial DNA is held on circular chromosomes, is evidence for the endosymbiotic theory, and is maternally inherited. And although I won't draw a chloroplast, chloroplast DNA is also on circular chromosomes, and again is evidence for the endosymbiotic theory. So that's a bit more information about genomes and chromosomes.